Hello and welcome to Reportage. This is Danish bin Nabi. In today's segment of Reportage, I am joined by Diplomat SD Muni to talk about his latest memoir, Dabbling in Diplomacy, where he talks about the relationship between India, Nepal, India, Sri Lanka, and his visits and India's relation with Pakistan. Let's listen into Mr. Mani. Mr. Mani, let me begin by asking you a simple question. At this age, what prompted you to write this book, your memoir?
Well, it's a question of many friends and students. I used to teach, I used to give them anecdotes of what happened. And they have been pressing on me that I must write it down for posterity or whatever else is. I never thought it was so important, but they continued to press upon me. And now at this last leg of my life, I thought, they continued to do that, so I succumbed to them. And in preface, I have mentioned it very clearly why I was hesitant to write, because I did not maintain a proper diary for all the developments which took place. And in the process of engagement with so many different people, sometimes you write something which may not be very palatable to them also. Therefore, I was always hesitant, but as I said, in the last leg of my life, I succumbed to my friends and my students.
Mr. Mani, your expertise, if I'm not wrong, have been the tackling Nepal's India's relation with Nepal. And you talk in the
One of
book,
the subjects, that is
one of
one
the
of the,
sons, yes.
yes.
And you talk in the book that in early 2000s, when there was a revolt, protests against King of Nepal, you were the only person, I must say, in the cabinet, in UPA government then, that you said, no, we should not support the king, but we should support the people. Why?
Well, in this age and time, democracies are moving forward. I have been writing on South Asian democracies for a long time. I wrote even in the UNESCO Journal and UN Journal and various other places. And my heart is that autocratic rules, whether by military or by monarchies, do not really respond to the people and their aspirations. And therefore, I have always been a votary of democracy. Now, the government of India at that time was following a policy of two pillars, which I have written. The two pillars are that the democratic political parties on the one hand and monarchy on the other. And they thought they should coexist. Probably the British model is in everybody's mind that constitutional monarchies work. But in Asia, constitutional monarchies have not worked anywhere. And I could see that the Nepali monarch was more of a authoritarian monarch rather than a constitutional monarch. And on several times they have staged a coup. They have thrown out the parties. They just wanted to do whatever they wanted to do. So my submission to them was that this is not in the interest of India. For largely also because India's adversaries like Pakistan, China, it was the Nepali monarchy which invited them in Nepal, despite displeasure on the part of India. So, both in terms of our national interest as also in the interest of the Nepali people, I always thought that democracy is more preferable, and monarchy should either be strictly constitutional, which the experience tells me that in Nepali monarchy has not been. That's why I was pleading what I was pleading.
And to utter surprise, only within few days, Mr. Natwar Singh stops that arms sale to the king.
No, Natwar Singh is stopped. I would say Government of India is stopped. This is a normal practice with the Ministry of External Affairs and ministers, some of those, not everybody, that they want to consult a wider opinion on some of the critical issues. This was not for the first time that I was in such a consultation. But when this consultation took place, not only me, I have mentioned another diplomat who was ambassador in Nepal, Arvind Dev. And we thought that the arms given to Nepal king at that time would only be used against its own people. And today also, I must mention it, which not many people are taking cognizance of it, that for the violence which took place in Nepal, about 18,000 people died during this insurgency. The entire blame is put on the Maoist, which is not correct, because a lot of people, and in fact, one of the think tanks, NGOs in Nepal has done a study, a survey, in which they found out that two-thirds of the killings are to be accounted to the Nepal army. Now, and nobody takes cognizance of it. Therefore, I mean, these facts were not known to me at that time, but during 60s we have seen that the arms given to the king were used only against the Nepali people. So there was no point in giving arms to him at a time when there was such a struggle going on in the country.
Mr. Mani, in the book, you have also mentioned about your relationship with Sri Lanka. You have been a close follower, closely watching that island too. A very basic and a historic question. Was it a mistake by Mr. Rajiv Gandhi to send the forces to that island?
No, I don't think so. I would refer my another book which is called Pangs of Proximity. I wrote on I have mentioned this in this book, but I wrote on India's role in Sri Lanka. Now, Rajiv Gandhi was an unusual politician. He had in his mind that we must resolve conflicts everywhere. You would recall that he did so in Punjab, he did so in Assam, in Northeast, wherever, and he was called a pactomania, that he was having pacts everywhere else. So when the Sri Lanka question came, he changed Mrs. Gandhi's policy and wanted to have the peace settled there. That's why he talked to J.R. Jayawardene, and it came out that we must have something to resolve this problem. And in the process of resolving this problem, it was the Sri Lankan government which asked him to send the troops because they were facing another insurgency in the south by the JVP. And they said the Sri Lankan forces were not adequate to deal with insurgencies on two fronts. So if you can help us. And Rajiv Gandhi tried to bring in all the Tamil groups together to have a consensus and a peaceful resolution. But what happened was that only LTT remained out. All other groups agreed to that. And that's why it was considered reasonable on the part of Rajiv Gandhi to fight the extremists which were there, and that's why he sent the troops there. And there was a gross miscalculation because I think the Sundarji, who was the army chief at that time, was very complacent and I would say overconfident to say that we will be able to control LTT because they are our boys and so on and so forth. Anyway, this did not happen. It's now a part of history. But I think Rajiv Gandhi did nothing wrong because he responded to the Sri Lankan government. I may underline here that India had responded to Sri Lankan government earlier also. In 1971, when the JVP insurgency came up, we extended whatever assistance we could, not lending troops there because they were not asked for. So in these circumstances, we must understand why IPKF went there and what IPKF done, which I have detailed in the other book, not here in this memo.
Mr. Mani, point well taken. Now let me come to the country which is sort of close to your heart, where you have made many friends, and that's Pakistan. In the book, you have mentioned about meeting two presidents of Pakistan. First, Ziaul Haq at a dinner, and you have met him when you talked with him about the nuclear, whether Pakistan has made successfully made nuclear or not. Talk about this experience. What was this dinner about, and what about the conversation? What are your fond memories of Mr. Ziaul Haq?
We had gone there for a conference on South Asia, peace, peace and cooperation in South Asia. And as I have mentioned very rightly, we had two other Indian colleagues with us. One was Professor Mohammad Ayub, and the second was Jasjit Singh, who was the director of the IDSA, Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis. And President, I think, as a part of courtesy, Ziaul Haq was known for his public relations. He always maintained an extremely well public relations. So he invited all the conference participants from foreign countries for a dinner. And there we went for a dinner, and we were on our own table. And then the president walked in and started talking, and he thought he was doing great things for building up India, Pakistan peaceful relations. And he mentioned, I did this, I did that. So in that context, the question of nuclear weapons by Pakistan, which was very live at that time, was raised by Ayub, and then all of us discussed that and asked him whether tell us whether you have the nuclear weapons or not. And that's what I have written. His answer was, we don't have nuclear weapons, but if India thinks that we have nuclear weapons, well, it's good for us because that becomes a deterrent, and they would always think that Pakistan is a nuclear weapon power.
And how did you find him as a person? How was Mr. Ziaul Haq as a person?
Well, we did not have a long interaction with him, frankly speaking. I mean, that was one dinner, and maybe about for 10 minutes he was on our table. But, he had as I said, personal relations were great. He gave us a book signed by him on Pakistan. One of our colleagues, American colleagues, Steve Cohen, he had a cut on his finger, and he immediately sent a doctor to mend it. It was these are small gestures. Then he asked Jasjit, where you want to go and see Pakistan. Both of us, me and Jasjit, he said he will go to Panja Sahib. I said we will go to Mohenjo-daro and see them. And he immediately provided transport, facilitated. So he was apparently, very soft, very suave in terms of dealing with people. But we all understand that he was a dictator. And we all understand that the way ruthlessly he removed Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and brought in Islam, and Islamic radicalism was encouraged under him. So these are the different aspects of it, and it would be wrong on my part to claim that we knew him. We had very small interaction, and that's what it was.
Mr. Muni, in the book, you have also mentioned about another dictator who had again ruthlessly pulled down another democratically elected government in Pakistan. That was Mr. General Musharaf. How did you view Mr. Musharaf as the president or as the army chief?
No, that again, Dennis, frankly, we should not claim that we knew Musharaf. In fact, Musharaf came here for the Agra meeting. Atal Bihari ji had called him. He had interaction with the media. There are a lot of narratives about him. But at that time, when we were there in Pakistan and we were put face to face with him, what he was doing was to have a track two relationship. Quiet relationship with quiet negotiations on the Kashmir issue. And he mentioned that there are 4 points in which we can resolve the Kashmir issue, and eventually it worked out. So we asked him publicly what his points were. And later on, Ambassador Satinder Lamba, who had now written, he's no more, unfortunately, but he penned down his memoirs in which he has gone into details of this proposal. And I remember both General Musharaf and Dr. Manmohan Singh announcing that we are very close to resolving the Kashmir issue and having peace between us. But it was at that critical time that Musharaf was removed as a president. And the government which followed General Musharaf in Pakistan said that we will not accept General's formula for resolution, and we will have a fresh, there were next elections, and the whole initiative got lost. But it is significant. For any students of India-Pakistan relationship, we must have one more point in mind and remember that most of the agreements between India and Pakistan have been signed during the military regimes. The Indus Water Treaty was signed during Ayub. later on also the nuclear issue, and therefore the military probably wants to have a credit that we want to make peace with India, but India is not very peaceful because they want to keep India as an adversary image for their own stakes in Pakistan economy and Pakistan politics. So it is the Pakistan's internal problem. But General Musharaf and Dr. Manmohan Singh almost reached on the verge of doing something about both the Kashmir problem as also India-Pakistan relations, but the destiny probably did not want it that way.
So how much forward they had gone, both Musharraf and Manmohan Singh, as far as Kashmir problem is concerned?
They had almost clinched it. They said, we cannot change the borders, but we can make borders irrelevant. And the whole thrust of their agreement at that time was that let there be a free movement of people and goods and services, and let people enjoy the peace and freedom. That was the whole, except it was still not which part of Kashmir belongs to you and which part of Kashmir belongs to us. It was more of a, I would say, confidence building measure, but going much beyond the normal confidence building measures. But as I said, it did not come through and was not achieved.
And had Musharraf not been removed, there was a possibility of a breakthrough on Kashmir.
I think so. I would think so because they were on the verge of signing it, and there were probably plans that either Manmohan Singh or Musharraf would visit each other, and then the things would be concluded. But then Musharraf ran into problems with his own political system, and he was removed.
Mr. Muni, is there any chance now to move forward on Kashmir with Pakistan?
Well, it's difficult to say at this time. Particularly, India is having elections. Pakistan has had a new government which is very weak, and I would say almost completely controlled by army. People are up against army in Pakistan. Things are not very stable. I don't know how long this new government in Pakistan would survive, and it's extremely difficult. And I think in India we have an establishment which at the moment is probably not willing to have any deal with Pakistan. Not
And
certainly until the elections held and new government comes to power.
but we have seen that Prime Minister Modi has congratulated Mr. Shahbaz Sharif on being elected for the
That's
second
a
time.
normal courtesy which has to be done. I think he has done well by doing so, but that's a normal courtesy whenever the new government takes place anywhere in the world, and particularly in our neighborhood, and especially in a neighbor like Pakistan. I think this courtesy should be extended.
What is your impression of Pakistan? Because in the book, as you have mentioned in the book, that you have been a frequent visitor to that state, to that nation. What are your impressions of that country? Because from what we see in media, it's not a good country. What is portrayed on the media? What are your
No, there is
impressions?
nothing wrong with the people. The problem of Pakistan is the civil military relations. And even in my classes, when I teach, I tell them one thing that India Pakistan relations will not improve unless the army goes back to the barracks. In Urdu, we say that जब तक पाकिस्तान आर्मी सियासत नहीं छोड़ेगी, पॉलिटिक्स नहीं छोड़ेगी, तब तक तिजारत नहीं बढ़ेगी, तब तक ट्रेड नहीं बढ़ेगा आपस में, या आपस में रिलेशंस नहीं बढ़ेंगे. The problem is in Pakistan's political system. I think people in Pakistan would like to have normal relations with India. Kashmir is an issue which is ideologically and emotionally now been, dug deep by the army's campaign into the Pakistan psyche, and something should be done. But normally people would settle down, and I would say I'll go back to the early 50s when Nehru was willing to have settlement along ceasefire line, that people would accept it. But as I said, this is not acceptable to the establishment in Pakistan. An establishment is dominated by the army. Army needs an adversary. and they want to project all the time this image that we are the savior of Pakistan. You have a big adversary like India who will save you. These are the complications within the Pakistani system. And
So
I think
unless we don't remove this component, this army component from their politics, we
we can't
cannot see a
remove.
breakthrough on Kashmir.
I don't see any solution until the army's dominance is gone there. And this is, we can't do anything. We in India cannot do much. I think it is much for the Pakistani people. I have a feeling that Pakistani people are increasingly becoming unhappy with the way army is governing them. You know, earlier uh, army would stage a coup and take over the power directly. Army today is in no position to take over power directly in Pakistan. And now, with Imran Khan's struggle, I think the way people have voted, they have voted against army. They have voted against army's, repression, suppression of Imran Khan. So there is an awakening, and most of these voters are young voters. They don't have the baggage of history with them to carry on. So let us wait, pray, and hope that Pakistan becomes a normal state. And once
So,
Pakistan becomes a normal state, the prospects of better relations with India would improve.
so two things I can gather from your answer is first that we should wait that army go back to the barracks. Second, the youth of Pakistan do not have a baggage history, which by these two components, India can move forward with the Pakistan if these two components are taken in a proper perspective.
I think so, but I would add here that, not talking to Pakistan is not always the best strategy. We remember, there is a Urdu couplet, "Baat se baat chale." Once you start talking and negotiating, we have been negotiating with them. Terrorism is not an issue which started in 2014. Even Atal Bihari Vajpayee suffered terrorism, but he talked to Pakistani people. Manmohan Singh talked to Pakistani people. Gujral talked to Pakistani government, and therefore this kind of a negotiation should not be stopped. Not talking is not an answer, but to some extent, it is unfortunate that Pakistan has now become a factor in India's domestic politics as well. You see many leaders in small meetings, small gatherings, election meetings. Anybody says you go to Pakistan, anybody they don't like, you go to Pakistan. That's not the way I think we should run our domestic politics. We are far more resilient, we are far more diverse, we are far more democratic in spirit. That is how we should look at it.
And Mr. Mani, I do hope that we do change on our level and they do change on their level, especially the two components, the two factors you have talked about, the youth of Pakistan and the Pakistan army. Thank you very much for talking to me, Mr. Mani. I am terribly running out of time, and let me
Muni,
hold you
yeah.
once again for the viewers so that it reaches maximum people and more people buy and read your book. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you very much.
Please subscribe to our channel Reportage and press the bell icon to remain updated.